JWT is a popular way to secure REST API. It's stateless, fast, and widely used. But it has one big limitation. Once a token is generated, it stays valid until it expires. There is no built-in way to invalidate it early. So, what happens when a user logs out? Or worse, if the token is compromised and you need to revoke access immediately? That's where Redis comes in. By temporarily storing JWT tokens in Redis, we can track active tokens and validate them on each request. Redis is an ultra-fast in-memory store perfect for this kind of job. In this video, I will walk you through the full setup, from creating a new Spring Boot project and generating JWTs to storing user credentials in PostgreSQL, and finally manage tokens with Redis to enable GL logout. So let's get started.
I am going to start the project from scratch. For creating new project, I am going to use my favorite online tool. Go to start.spring.io. From here, select Maven as a project. Language is Java. For the Spring Boot version, choose the latest Spring Boot version, that is 3.4.5 at the time of this recording. Then we need the group name, that is com.learnwithiftekhar. Then artifact name, let's say it is Redis token management. Let's give it a short description. Redis and Spring Boot, no, not Spring Boot, it will be Spring Security token management. Packaging is jar, and for Java, I'm going to use Java version 21. Now it's time to add the dependencies. Click this Add Dependencies button to add the dependencies. The first dependency we need, that is Spring Web. Then we need Spring Security. We also need Spring Data JPA. For this project, I'm going to use PostgreSQL as my database, so we need PostgreSQL driver. Then we need Redis dependency. So search for Redis. Here you can see we have these 3 dependencies available related to Redis. But for this project, we need this Spring Data Redis. I need this one, Spring Data Redis, that is access plus driver. And finally, we need dependency for our validation. We will use this for input validation. That's all the dependency that we need. Now click on this generate button. It will generate and download the project. Our project is generated and downloaded as zip file. Let's open it in your favorite IDE. I have opened the project in IntelliJ IDEA. I am using the Ultimate Edition. If you are using other IDE like Spring Tool Suite or Eclipse or NetBeans, go with that. IDE is just a tool. You can use whatever IDE you want, but make sure you know how to compile and run your project. Now in this project, I need to add additional dependency for JWT. For this, opening this pom.xml file. Let's close the sidebar to make it some room. Scrolling down, here the dependency that we have added. Along with this dependency, I need additional dependency for JWT. I will add it here. To get the dependency, let's open a new tab in the browser. Here, search for Maven Central. Here you can see this first result for Maven Central, that is from central.sonatype.com. Enter into this site. Here in the search box, we'll search for the dependency. The first dependency we need, that is JWT API. Here you can see we have these 2 dependency found. We need this one from io.jsonweb token. Click here. Now make sure you have selected this Apache Maven from drop down and copy this dependency declaration by clicking on this copy to clipboard button back to the IDE and paste it in our pom.xml file. The next dependency I need, that is JWT implementation. This one is the dependency. Click here and copy this and paste it in our IDE. Again, search for JWT-Jackson. This one is the dependency. Copy this and paste it to the pom.xml file. Another dependency that we need, that is Loombook. Search for it. I am using Loombook for reducing some boilerplate codes. This is our dependency. Clicking on this and copy this dependency declaration and paste it to our pom.xml file. Now we have added all the necessary dependencies here. Now we need to synchronize these Maven changes. Click on this refresh icon here to synchronize the Maven changes. So the project is updated successfully. Let's close this pom.xml file. Now start the project. Let's make this console a little bit bigger. Let's check what is the issue. Application failed to start. What is the reason? Failed to configure data source. URL attribute is not configured. Okay. We actually did not have configured our database. So basically what is happening here that we have included Spring Data JPA, but we have not configured our database yet. That's why whenever we are starting this project, it's trying to connect to the database, but as we have not configured anything, it's unable to connect to the database and it's throwing this error. Let's configure our database. Open the sidebar from src, main, resources. Open this application.properties file. Here we will provide the necessary configurations of our database. I do not need these properties. Let's remove it. Now let's provide the necessary PostgreSQL configuration. The first thing we need, that is database URL. We can do this using spring.datasource.url. For PostgreSQL, it is JWT:/PostgreSQL:/, then the server address, in my case it is localhost, then 5432, the port where the PostgreSQL is running, and the database name Redis_Spring. Then we need to provide the username spring.datasource.username, that is in my case it's Postgres, and password spring.datasource password. This is, I am giving my database password here. Additionally, we need to provide driver class name spring.datasource.driver-class name. This is org.postgresql.driver. This is the minimum configuration that is necessary for connecting with the database. But additionally, I would like to add some JPA properties. The first property I am going to use to provide the target database to operation. We can give it using spring.jpa.database. Here we are using PostgreSQL database. Then we need to provide the database platform. This is org.hibernate.dialect.postgresql dialect. Then I want to see the executed queries in the console. So here I am going to use the property spring.jpa.showSQL and set it to true. Then I am going to provide the property spring.jpa.hibernate.dtl-auto. Here we have couple of options: create drop, create, none, update, and validate. For our project, we are going to use update. If you want to know more about these DTL auto properties, check out my other video tutorial on Spring Data JPA crash course. Then I want to see the query formatted. For this, we need to use the property spring.jpa.properties.hibernate.format_SQL and set it to true. And finally, let's provide the configuration for the Redis. That is Spring Data Redis host. Here we need to provide the address of the host. I am running Redis on my localhost, so this is localhost in my case. And the port spring.data.redis.port. My Redis is running on default port, that is 6379. Now it's time to create this database Redis_Spring. For creating this database, you can use command line tool or any GUI tool like pgadmin. But as I am using IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate Edition, this comes with database tool. We can use this IDE as my GUI tool. I am going to use that. To do this, click on this database icon, then on this plus icon, select data source. Here, selecting PostgreSQL. Here, this is the host name. I am running this on localhost, and this is the port. And here, I am providing the username of my database and the password. Let's test the connection if we can connect with the database. Yes, it succeeded. Just click OK to save the configuration. Here you can see we have this database connection showing in this database panel, and also a new tab named console is opened. Here we can write database queries, but I'm not going to use that right now. Let's close this. Here I'm going to create a new database. The name of the database is Redis underscore Spring. So right click on this connection, new database. Here give the database name. It is Redis underscore Spring. Here in the preview you can see the query, it is going to be executed. Click OK. Our database is created. It's not showing here. Let's make it visible. Click on this refresh icon. Here it's showing now. Mark this and now it's visible. And it's not showing any database schema. Let's show the public schema. Now currently inside this schema we do not have any table. Now let's try to run this project. The project is started. Let's expand this console a little bit. Here you can see a default password is generated by Spring Security. Now let's check the application in the browser. Navigate to localhost 8080. Here you can see we have this login page. This is default login page provided by Spring Security. Let's try to log in here. First copy this default password and here provide the username. The default username is user and paste the password. Sign in. We have successfully logged in, but you can see we have this white label error page with status code 404. This is because we have not configured any endpoint to process this request. Let's fix this one. Back to the IDE, closing the console, open the sidebar. Inside Java, that is inside src main Java, we have this base package. Inside this package, let's create a new package named controller. Here create a new Java class, home controller. Annotate this with REST controller to make it REST resource. Here inside this class, add a get mapping for handling root URL. Then create a new method, public string home. Here my IDE is suggesting a code. I'm okay with this code. So let's hit tab to accept this one. So when we navigate to the home URL, after login, we should see this message, welcome to Redis token management. Let's test it. Restart the server. Here a new password is generated. Let's copy this in the browser, refresh this page, provide the username user and paste the password and sign in. Here you can see we have successfully signed in and here is the message from the controller. So our application is working. Now it's time to implement the security with JSON Web Token, securing the REST API with JWT. And after that, I'll show you how to manage this JWT token with the Redis. For that, let's first create the necessary package. Opening the sidebar, let's close other tabs. I don't need this for now. Inside this base package, creating a new package named config. We'll put all the configuration files inside this config package. Then another package named DTO. This package is for DTO classes. Another new package. This one is for model. New package. Repository. Another package. The name of this package is security. I'll put JWT related classes inside this security package. Then create another package. Name it service. And these are all the packages that we need. Now let's start with creating our model. The first model I'm going to create is user. Inside this model package, new Java class. This is our user. Collapsing the sidebar for making some room. Annotate this user with entity annotation to make it entity. Give it a table annotation. Name of the table is app_user. Now for entity, we need a primary key. So inside this class, give a annotation ID, create a private field, long ID. Here, I want to mention how this ID will be generated. So give it an annotation, generated value, and strategy, provide the strategy using which the ID will be generated. I want this to be sequence, generation type dot sequence. After that, we need additional fields for user. We need username and password. For the username, give it a column annotation and set this unique, and also mark this nullable to false. For password, column and nullable to false. Here for setter and getter, I am going to use Lombok's annotation. Give it annotation setter and getter, and also give it annotation all args constructor, and finally no args constructor. Beside this, I need additional constructor which will include username and password, but not this ID. Let's create this one. My ID is suggesting to create this field for role. In typical Spring Security application, we need to provide granted authority, but here I am going with bare minimum. I am not going to provide any role because in this tutorial I am not going to show you the authorization technique. If you want to know the authorization or role-based access control, you can check my other video. For now, let's generate a new constructor. Select all the field except this ID. Click OK. And that's all for our user model. Now, let's create a repository for this user. New Java class. Make sure this interface is selected and name this repository user repository. This user repository extends JPA repository. And here we need to provide the name of the entity for which we have created this repository, that is user. Here we can see we have user from couple of package. We need to include this one that we have just created and provide the data type of our primary key, that is long. Here I'll define a new method, return type optional, user, find by username, and it accepts string username. We need to import this optional class from JWTL. With this method, Spring will automatically understand that we are querying the database and we are searching the data by username. I have a dedicated video where I have discussed this method naming convention in details. You can check this on my channel. Now, inside this service package, creating a new Java class, name it custom user service. If you are familiar with Spring Security, you may know that Spring Security requires to implement user details service interface to retrieve user-specific data during the authentication process. This interface acts as a bridge between Spring Security and the application's user data storage. And in our case, this is our PostgreSQL database. This user details service requires us to implement a method that is load user by username. Let's implement it. Here, inside this method, we will query the database to get the user and return that user. For this, we need to inject user repository, adding a new field, private final user repository. We need to inject it with constructor. So I'm going to use Lombok annotation, required args constructor. Now, inside load user by username method, create a new variable of type user. Here you can see we have user from various packages. Here we need to use this user that we have created earlier from this our project's model package. Name it user equals user repository dot find by username. Provide the username. If user is not found, then throw an exception, username not found exception with message user not found with the username. If the user is found, then we'll return new instance of user. This time, make sure this user is from org.springframework.security.core.userdetails. This user accepts couple of parameters. The first one is username, the second one is the password, and finally, collection of granted authorities of that user. In our case, in this project, we have not defined any authority or role for our user. So here, I'm going to give a static role. So list.off, creating new simple granted authority with name role underscore user. So that's all for our custom user service. Now in this config package, create a new Java class, name it security config, give it annotation configuration, and enable web security, and also required args constructor. Here I will inject our custom user details service, creating a new private field, final custom user details service. Then I will create a bin for password encoder, public password encoder, and it returns new bcrypt password encoder. Then another bin, this one is for security filter chain. This accepts HTTP security and throws exception and returns http.build. Before returning, I am going to configure this HTTP security object. HTTP dot. At first, I am going to disable this CSR protection. My ID is suggesting some modifications. We can replace this lambda with method reference. Let's go for it. Then dot user details service. Here, provide the user details service that we want to use. In our case, this is custom user service. And also for the login form, provide form login. Not actually form login. I'm going to use HTTP basic as this is REST API customizer dot with defaults. As we have configured Spring Security, so Spring Security will no longer provide any default password. We need to store user in our database. For that, I'm going to add user registration functionality. Inside this controller package, create a new Java class, name it auth controller, annotate this with REST controller. Inside this class, adding post mapping with the endpoint register, public method returns response entity, name it register new user. This accepts a request body of type register request. Import this response entity class. We have not defined this register request yet. Let's define it. Inside this DTO package, create new Java class, register request. This register request have two fields, username and password. Give it validation rule. For username, it is not blank with message. Username is required. And for password, same, not blank with a message. Password is required. In this class, give it annotation, setter and getter. Now, in the auth controller, import this register request. Now, inside this method, we'll save the user to the database. As this is controller, the controller should not contain any business logic. For this, I am going to create a separate service. Inside service class, create a new Java class, name it auth service. Annotate this with service annotation. Then required args constructor, add a field, private final user repository. Here, for registration, create a new public method, returns void, name register new user. It accept register request. Here, first we'll check if the user is already exist. We can check this using user repository dot find by username. Here, provide the username. If present, then we'll throw new runtime exception. User already exists. Otherwise, we'll create a new user. So user equals new user. Here, provide the information that we have received from the request. First one is username, request.get username, then request.get password. Actually, we don't use the raw password. We need to hash this password and provide it there. For that, another field, private final password encoder. So here, we'll encode this password using password encoder dot encode and request dot get password. That's it. And finally, save the user using user repository dot save. Now back to the auth controller. Here, inject our auth service using private final auth service and give this class annotation all args constructor. Inside this register new user method, call auth service dot register new user. Provide the request and finally return response entity dot OK with message user registered successfully. Now let's test this. Start the service. Our project is started and in the console you can see the query that a new table app user has been created. Now in the browser, let's refresh this page. It's not showing the login prompt. Maybe I have made some mistake. Let's try to log out. No, there is error. Now let's check our security config. Here, as we have overridden Spring's default behavior, so we need to make sure that we have protect the endpoints. For that, we need the property authorize HTTP request. Then request arrow request dot any request dot authenticated. Here I am telling that any request coming to this application must be authenticated. Now start the project again in the browser. Update the URL. Here in this browser, it's showing a prompt for providing username and password. As we have configured Spring Security to use the user from the database, so we need to register a new user. For this, I'm going to use Postman to send the request to register a new user. Let's open the Postman, open a new tab for registration. First, I'm going to register a new user. This will be post request. The URL will be, let's check our controller, minimize the console. This is our auth controller. Here, I'm going to add a request mapping to API auth. Back to the Postman, providing the URL, localhost 8080 API auth register. Click on this body. This will be our raw data of type JSON. The JSON data here. Username is my name, Iftekhar. Then giving a password and send the request. Now it's showing 401 unauthorized. Let's check security config. Here, check this statement. We have mentioned that any request must be authenticated. But here, we want to whitelist this registration URL. Because before even login or authentication, we need to register the user. Actually, I will whitelist this URL that start with API/auth. Let's do this. Here, request matcher, provide the endpoint /API/auth, then double star. This makes sure everything comes after this URL API/auth/ will be applicable for this rule, and I want to make this permit all. Now let's start the project. Our project is started. Back to the Postman. Now send the request. This time the user registered successfully. Now back to the browser. Here in the username field, provide the username and the password. Sign in. We can successfully sign in. Now let's try to log in using the Postman. Opening a new tab. It is get request. The URL is localhost 8080. If we send the request, this time we will get 401 unauthorized because we have not logged in. Navigate to this authorization tab, select basic auth as auth type, and here provide the username of the registered user and password. Send the request. This time we will get this response from the controller. Now we have successfully completed the first part of our tutorial, that is customizing our Spring security and authenticate the user against the saved user in the database. Now we'll move to the next part, that is we'll generate JSON Web Token and show you how to manage this in Redis. Opening the IDE, closing the console. Let's close all the tabs. In the security package, let's create a new Java class. Right click, new Java class. Name this JWT token provider. Collapse the sidebar. Annotate this class with component to make this managed bean. Here, this class will be responsible for generating JSON Web Token. Will actually generate access token and refresh token. This class will also contain necessary logic for the token validation. Let's implement those one by one. First one, generate JWT token. For this, we need to define a couple of fields. The first one is JWT secret, private string JWT secret. Then the issuer, private string issuer. The next field is private long JWT expiration in millisecond. And finally, the refresh token expiration in millisecond. I'm going to set the value of these fields in our application.properties file. Let's open our application.properties file. Here at the bottom, I will add JWT configurations. The first one is for secret key. This is JWT.secret. Here we need to provide a very long secret key. Typically, it should be 256-bit long. Let's generate it. Now open the terminal. Here my IDE comes with this built-in terminal. Just click this terminal icon. Here I'm running this command for generating the secret key, that is open SSL. Then rand, I want it to be base 64 encoded. My secret key will be 256-bit long. Here we need to provide this in byte. 256-bit is actually 32 bytes. And hit enter. Here our key is generated. Let's copy this and paste this in our properties file. Next, we need the issuer, JWT.issuer. Here I am setting the issuer as learnwithiftekhar.com. Then we need to provide the JWT expiration time, and that will be in millisecond. JWT.expiration. Our JWT will be valid for 1 hour, 60 minutes times 60 seconds times 1000 millisecond, and that is equal to 36 then 5 zeros. Then the expiration time for the refresh token, it will be valid for 1 week, that is 7 days times 24 hour times 60 minutes times 60 seconds and times 1000 millisecond, and that is equals 6048 then 5 zeros. Now back to the JWT token provider. Here we are going to set these values for the JWT secret. For setting the value from the properties, we need this value annotation. Make sure you import this from Spring Framework Beans Factory Annotation package. Then quotation, $, curly braces. Inside this curly braces, provide the property key. For the secret key, it is JWT.secret. Then the value of the issuer, value JWT.issuer. Then the expiration time of the JWT, value $. The property key of this JWT expiration millisecond was JWT.expiration. And finally, the value for the refresh token expiration, it is JWT.refresh expiration. Now it's time to generate the tokens. At the first, I'm going to generate this access token, creating a public method string generate access token. It accepts username of type string. Here, first let's calculate the expiration time. First, a date variable to store current time, now equals new date. Now we'll calculate the expiry date and store it into expiry date variable. It's equal new date. Here inside this constructor, I'm going to provide the time when it will be expired. This will be current time, that is now dot get time plus JWT expiration in millisecond. And finally, we'll generate and return the token. I'm going to create a separate method for generating the token, and this method will accept username and expiry date as the parameter. Let's create this method. This is the new method for generate token is created. Let's move this method below. Here I forgot to provide semicolon. Actually here, let's cut this portion. I will calculate the expiration time inside this generate token method, and this generate token method, instead of accepting the date, we are going to accept long and change the variable name to expiry. Update the variable name in the expiry date calculation. Update this variable with JWT expiration ms. Now inside the generate token method, we are going to build the token. JWT builder, name it builder equals JWTs dot builder. Then set the issuer, set subject dot subject, provide username as subject. Then issue date, expiration, provide the expiry date. Then we need to sign this token with our secret key. Here I'm going to call a separate method for getting the secret key, get sign-in key. And finally return builder.compact. Now let's create this get sign-in key method. This get sign-in key method returns keys.hmakesha_key4, provide the JWT secret dot get bytes. Inside this method, provide the character encoding, that is UTF-8, and change the return type of this method to secret key. Now we have generated the access token. Let's create method to generate the refresh token. Let's copy this generate access token method and paste it below. Rename this method to generate refresh token. In this generate token method, replace the JWT expiration millisecond with refresh token expiration millisecond. And for refresh token, additionally, I will add extra claims. So let's define a map object for setting the claims. Map, key type is string and value is type object, claims equals new hash map. And finally, provide the claims using claims.put, key is scopes and the value is refresh. This is just for differentiating the refresh token from the access token. Now, in this generate token method, pass the claims. Let's update our generate token method to accept that claims. Map claims. Let's update calling to generate token from generate access token. Here for generating access token, we are not going to give any claims, so I'm providing null. In the generate token method, here I'm going to provide a checking if claims is not null. In that case, we are going to add claims to the JSON web token. Builder.claims and provide the claim. That is for generate access token and refresh token. Here at the top, I'm going to create a new method, token pair, and name it generate token pair. It accepts username. Inside this generate token pair method, first let's generate access token. String access token equals generate access token. Provide the username. Then generate refresh token. Generate refresh token and username. And this returns new instance of token pair. In the constructor, provide the access token and refresh token. Let's create this token pair class. Inside this DTO package, new Java class, token pair. This token pair will have two properties, private string access token and private string refresh token. Provide annotation, getter and all args constructor. Back to the JWT token provider. Here, import this token pair class. When the user logs in, we'll call this generate token pair to generate access token and refresh token and return it to the user. Let's make this generate access token to private and also make private this generate refresh token method. Now it's time to validate the token. For this, I'm going to create a new method, public. It returns boolean, name validate token. It accepts token. Add a try catch block. Here we'll parse a JWT. JWTs.parser.verify with. Here provide the signing key, get sign-in key, then build and dot get sign claims. Pass the token. If it's successfully parsed, then return true. Otherwise, we'll catch the exception. The first exception that we'll catch is signature exception. I will log an error, invalid JWT signature. Here it's showing an error. In this class for login, we need to add an annotation slf4j from Lombok extern.sl4j. Now back to the validate token method. Here catch another exception, malformed JWT exception. Provide log.error, invalid JWT token. Another catch block with expired JWT exception. Then provide the log message, expired JWT token. And finally, catch illegal argument exception and error log with the message JWT claim string is empty. And finally, return false. Now we are going to configure Redis to store this generated token. First, we need to configure Redis template. Inside config package, create a new Java class, Redis config. Give it annotation configuration. Here, create a new bean, public. This bean will for Redis connection. That is Redis connection factory. Return new Redis connection factory. Another bean, public Redis template. It will be type string as key and object as value. Redis template. Instantiate new Redis template. Then template dot set connection factory. Provide the connection factory. Then we need to provide the key serializer. Template dot set key serializer. This will be new string Redis serializer. Then we need to set the value serializer. Template dot set value serializer. It is new generic JSON to JSON Redis serializer. Then set the serializer for hash key. Template dot set hash key serializer. This is new string Redis serializer. And finally, set hash value serializer. Template dot set hash value serializer. In the constructor, provide new generic JSON to JSON Redis serializer. Then template dot after property set, and finally return the template. In this repository package, I'm going to create a repository for communicating with Redis. Create new Java class, name token repository, annotate this with repository. Add a private field, private final Redis template. I am adding Loombook annotation, required args constructor. Inside this class, let's define couple of variables. Now we'll define key prefixes for our token storage. First one is private, make this static, and final string access token prefix. The prefix will be user :access, then colon. Then another prefix, private static final string. Let's copy this variable name, paste it here, and change it to refresh. So it is refresh token key prefix. It will be user :refresh. Then provide the prefixes for token blacklisting. Private static final string access blacklist prefix. It is blacklist :access:. Let's copy this variable, paste it below. This will be for refresh blacklist prefix, and update the value to blacklist :refresh. Create a private variable. Now add a private variable long JWT expiration. Set this value from the properties value JWT expiration, and also another variable for storing refresh token expiration, and value is from JWT dot refresh expiration. Now here we are going to store both access token and refresh token for a user. Create a public method, return void store token. It accepts username, access token, and refresh token. Here first we will store the access token. A new variable is access key for this user, access key prefix concat with username. Then call Redis template dot ops for value and set the key is access key and the value is the access token, and also set expire of the data. Redis template dot expire. Provide access key for which we are going to set the expiry, and provide the expiry time. For access token, it will be JWT expiration, and provide the time unit. It is time unit dot milliseconds. Now store the refresh token. String, then refresh key. It is refresh key prefix concat with username. Then Redis template dot ops for value, set the access key is refresh key and provide the refresh token, and set the expiry of the data. Redis template dot expire. Refresh key, and the expiration for refresh key is refresh token expiration, and as a last parameter provide the time unit dot milliseconds. Here you can see we are typing the same code multiple times. Let's extract it to a separate variable. Create a separate method, private void, name it store token. It accepts key, that is type string, then token, and the expiration. Let's cut this portion of code, paste inside store token method, update these variable names. This is key, this one is token, again this one is key. For the expiration, update the expiration, and from this method call this store token, provide the key, refresh token, and the expiration time, refresh token expiration. Do the same for this access token. Remove this block of code, call store token, pass this access key, access token, and JWT expiration time. Now we'll retype the access token from the Redis for the user. New public method, return string, get access token, it accepts username. First, generate the key, access key, that is access token prefix concate with username, and returns. It will call the separate method get token. It accepts the access key. Let's create this method. Inside this get token method, define a new object access token equals Redis template dot ops for value dot get. Here provide the key that is access key and return. Actually, let's rename this access token to token. And in return statement, if the token is not null, then it will return token dot toString. Otherwise, it will return null. Let's copy this method, paste it below. This method will be for retrieving refresh token for a user. Update the method name to get refresh token. Here, replace this access token key prefix with refresh token key prefix and call the get token to get the refresh token from the Redis. Here, let's generate documentation for this get token. Actually, let's generate with this AI assistant. Click here. Wow, it just generate a handy description of our method. It's nice. Now, I'm going to create a new method for removing all tokens of the user. This is actually for the complete logout of the user. Creating a public method returns void remove all tokens. It accepts username. First, get the access token, call get access token, provide username. Then get the refresh token, get refresh token, username. First, remove the tokens. Here, first we'll remove the token, and if the token is still valid, then we'll blacklist the token. Let's remove this token from the Redis. String. Here first get the access key prefix, concate with username, then refresh key. Move this line below for making it some room. Then string refresh key. This is refresh token prefix, concate with username. Now delete this access token and refresh token from Redis. Redis template dot delete. First one is provide access key to delete access token from the Redis. Then for the refresh token, Redis template dot delete refresh key. Now we will blocklist the token. Here first I will check if access token is not null. If not null, then we will blocklist this token. For blocklisting, first we need to generate a key. Add a new variable string, name it access blacklist key, that is equals access blacklist prefix concate with access token. Then call the method blacklist token and pass access blacklist key and JWT expiration as the parameter. Now let's create this method. Change the parameter name to blacklist key and change JWT expiration to expiration. Here we'll set Redis template dot ops for value and set key is blacklist key and the content is blacklisted. And we will also provide the expiry of this data. Redis template dot expire. Here provide the key, that is blacklist key, then the expiration time, and finally the time unit. Now we will blocklist the refresh token. Again, checking if refresh token is not null. In that case, first get the refresh key, that is refresh backlist prefix concate with refresh token, and call backlist token method. Provide refresh key and refresh token expiration as parameter. Here we already defined this variable name refresh key. Let's change this. Let's change this to refresh blacklist key. Update the method parameter. Now I will add another method to check if the access token is blacklisted. Public method, return type boolean, name is access token blacklisted. It accepts token. First define the key, that is access backlist prefix concate with token, and return boolean.true equals Redis template dot has key. Here I am simply checking if our key exists in Redis. This pattern safely compares the result from hash key with true, avoiding potential null issues while determining whether our database contains the key we are looking for. My IDE is suggesting a simplification. Let's simplify it. And again, another method for checking if refresh token is blacklisted. It accepts refresh token. First define the key. String key equals refresh blacklist prefix concate with refresh token and return Redis template dot has key and pass the key. Now it's time to work with the auth service. Let's close all the tabs and navigate to auth service. Where is our auth service? Open this auth service. Here we need to inject couple of dependencies. The first one is authentication manager, private final authentication manager. Then we need JWT token provider. We also need custom user service that we have defined earlier. And another dependency, token repository. Here I will write the method for authenticating the user. Public method, it returns authentication response, name it login, it accepts login request. Now let's define this authentication response class. Inside DTO package, create new Java class, authentication response. Give it annotation, setter, getter, all args constructor. This authentication response will contain access token, refresh token, and the granted authority of the user. Let's define these fields. Private, string, access token. Then for refresh token, string, refresh token. And for granted authority, it is type of collection that extends from granted authority. Name this field authorities. Back to the auth service. Import this authentication response class. Now we need to create this login request class. Inside DTO package, create new Java class. This is login request. Our login request will contain username and password. For these fields, let's add validation rules. The username must not be blank, so add annotation, not blank. The same thing for password. Add annotation, not blank. Now back to the auth service. Here in this login method, in return statement, I'll call another method authenticate user. This authenticate user will accept two parameters, username and password. So login request dot get, it's not showing the getter method from login request. Let's check this. Navigate to login request. Here we need to annotate this with setter and getter, and also all args constructor. Back to the auth service. Here in the authenticate user method, pass login request dot get username and login request dot get password. Now let's create this method. I will make this method private. It returns authentication response, name authenticate user. It accepts username and password. Inside this method, first let's authenticate the user. We need an authentication instance, name authentication. This equals, here I'll call authentication manager dot authenticate. Here in this authenticate method, we need to provide username password authentication token object. Here in the constructor of this username password authentication token, provide the username and password. And after authenticating, we need to set the authentication in security context. For setting security context, we need security context holder dot get context, then set authentication and pass the authentication as the method parameter. And after that, we will generate the token pair, that is access token and refresh token. Token pair equals token provider dot generate token pair. Provide authentication. Showing error. Let's check our generate token pair method. Here it accepts string. Let's change this to authentication. Change the parameter name from username to authentication. Inside this generate token method, for getting the username, first we need to get the user details from the authentication object. Authentication.getPrincipal. And in the generate access token, change this username to userdetails.getUsername. Same for generate refresh token, userdetails.getUsername. Here we need to cast these with user details. Now back to auth service. After generating the token pair, we'll store this token in the Redis. For this, we need the user details. Authentication.getPrincipal. Call the token repository .store. Here, provide the username, userdetails.getUsername, then access token, token pair.getAccess token, and then refresh token, token pair.getRefresh token, and return new instance of authentication response. In the constructor, provide access token, then refresh token, and the granted authority, user details.getAuthorities. Here we need to cast this with user details. Now let's update this registered user method. Instead of returning void, I want to return authentication response. Change the return type to authentication response. Here, after storing the user, then return statement, call authenticate user, and provide the username and password, request.getUsername and request.getPassword. Now let's scroll down, and here add a public method, returns void logout. In this logout method, for logging out, first we need to get current authenticated user. User details that equals, we'll get the authenticated user from security context. Security context holder dot get context, and then get authentication. We'll call get principal method to retrieve the user details. We need to cast this expression with user details. After getting the user details, now we'll remove all the tokens for this user from the Redis. Token repository dot remove all tokens and provide the username, user details dot get username. And this is for logout. And we need to another method for adding refresh token functionality. Creating a public method, return response entity, name refresh token. It accepts refresh token. Here first, validate the token. If statement, calling token providers validate token to check if the refresh token is valid. Provide the refresh token, and if this is not valid, then we'll return response entity dot bed request with the body invalid refresh token. We need to add another checking if the token is blacklisted. If, provide a if statement, then call the token repository dot is refresh token blacklisted, provide a refresh token, and if this is true, we'll return. Let's copy the return statement from previous if block and paste it here. So we'll return response entity with bed request and body with message error refresh token is blacklisted. And now for generating new refresh token, we need to extract a username from the refresh token. String username, it's equal JWT token provider dot, here I am calling get username from token and provide the refresh token. Now we need to create this method in our JWT token provider. Let's create this. This is our JWT token provider class and the method is created. Let's update the parameter name from refresh token to token. For getting the username from this method, first we need to extract the claims from the token and get the subject, because we set username as a subject of our token. For this, I'm going to create a separate method to extract all the claims from the tokens. Return, call get claims from token, provide the token, and call get subject. Let's create this get claims from token method. Here in this get claims from token method, returns, we will parse the token, extract the claims, and return this. JWTs.parser dot then verify it with our secret key, get sign in key, then build and parse signed claims, provide a token, and finally get the payload. And now back to the auth service. So here we are extracting the username from the token and storing in username variable. Now we need to check if the refresh token exists in the Redis and if it matches the one sent in the request. For this, add a new variable string stored refresh token, call token repository dot get refresh token, and provide the username. Here if statement, if stored refresh token is null or stored refresh token does not equals to refresh token, in that case we will return bad request. Return response entity dot status. Here provide the status code, that is status dot unauthorized, and add a body with message error invalid refresh token. Here for other return statement we did this differently. Let's make all the return statements similar. Copy this statement and paste it here, and also paste this return statement of this token validation checking. Now if everything passed, then we will authenticate the user. We will get the user details from the database, adding a new variable user details. This time we will get the user information from the database. Custom user service dot load user by username, provide the username. Now we need to create authentication object, that is username password authentication token. Auth token equals new instance of username password authentication token. Here in the constructor we need to provide user details, then the credentials, which is null because we are authenticating using the refresh token, and provide the authorities. Now after authenticating, we will generate new access token. String new access token equals JWT token provider dot generate. No, we are not going to generate a token pair again. We will only generate the access token. Let's check our JWT token provider. This is JWT token provider variable. Let's check this. Here we have this generate access token method. Make this to public. Back to auth service. Where was our refresh token method? Yeah, here. Here generate access token. Provide the username. User details dot get username. Now we need to update access token in the Redis. First we need to remove previous access token. Token repository dot remove access token. Provide the username. We need to create this method. Back to token repository. Here add a new method, public return void remove access token. It accepts username. In this method, here first get the access token. Access token equals get access token. Then get the access key, that is access token key prefix, concat with username, and then delete this token from Redis. Redis template dot delete and provide the key, that is access key, and then blacklist this access token. For this, let's copy the code block from here and paste it. That's all for remove access token. Now back to the auth service. Now we need to add new access token in the Redis. Token repository dot stored token. Here in this stored token method, we need to provide the username, user details dot get username, then new access token and refresh token, and return response entity dot OK with new authentication response, provide the new access token, refresh token, and user details dot get authorities. Now let's close all the tabs. Navigate to auth controller. Here we'll add necessary endpoints for logging, logout, and refresh tokens. First, let's update our register method. Here, let's cut this statement and paste this in our response entities body. Remove this comment. Now add a new post mapping for login. Public method returns response entity of type authentication response. Let's update the return type of register new user method. Response entity of type authentication response. Same for the login. Response entity of type authentication response. Name this method login. Here provide annotation valid for input validation. Then the request body. In request body will accept login request, and this returns response entity dot OK and call auth service dot login and provide login request as the parameter. Now the post method for logout. Public response entity returns string logout, call auth service dot logout, and this returns response entity dot OK with the message you have been signed out. And finally, another post mapping for refresh token. Endpoint is refresh. Public method response entity. Name refresh token. Add valid annotation for input validation. Request body. This accepts refresh token request. Name request. Now we need to create this refresh token request. Inside DTO package, new Java class, refresh token request. Provide annotation setter, getter, and all args constructor. This refresh token request will have one field, private string refresh token, and add validation rule not blank. Back to the auth controller. Here import this refresh token class. Extract refresh token from this refresh token request dot get refresh token, and return auth service dot refresh token. Provide the refresh token. So that's all for our controller. Now we'll add a custom filter that checks every request. It looks for a token in the authorization header, and if the token is valid, it authenticates the user. For this, in this security package, create a new Java class, name JWT authentication filter. This filter extends from once per request filter. Here we need to implement a method that is doFilterInternal. In this class, add annotation SL4J for logging, and another annotation component annotation, and another annotation required args constructor. In this JWT authentication filter, we need to inject token provider. Make this field private. Final JWT token provider. This is not protected. We need to make this private. Another dependency, private, final, custom user service. And we also need token repository, private, final, token repository. Now in the doFilterInternal method, let's move this parameter into multiple lines for better readability. Inside this method, add a try catch block, try, and it will catch if there is any exception. Inside this try block, we need to extract the JWT token from the request. String JWT equals, here I will call a separate method, get JWT from request. Provide the request. Now let's create this method. The private method, string get JWT from request. It accepts HTTP servlet request. Here first we'll extract the bearer token from the authorization header. String bearer token, that is equals request dot get header, and here we want to get it from authorization header. And if this bearer token is not null and this bearer token starts with bearer followed by space, then we have this token present in the header. So we'll return bearer token dot and we substring by 7. Why 7? Here this authorization header with bearer token has this format: bearer followed by space, then the token. If we count the character before this token, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and including space, it's 7. So we need to substring by 7, and otherwise return null. Back to the doFilter internal method. Here we'll check if this JWT token is null. For this checking, we'll use string utils from Spring Framework UTL package and check has text, provide the JWT, and we also validate the token. JWT token provider dot validate token, provide a JWT. If both are true, then we'll proceed with the authentication process. Inside this if block, get the username from the token, string username equals token provider dot get username from token, provide the JWT. Now we need to verify if the token matches the stored token in the Redis for that user. So get the stored token from the Redis, stored token equals token repository dot get access token and provide the username. If the stored token is null or the stored token does not match with the provided JWT, stored token dot equals JWT, then we log a warning message, token mismatch for user, and pass the request to the next filter of the filter chain without authenticating it and return. Now if everything is okay, then we will authenticate the user. First we need to get the user details from user service. User details equals user service dot load user by username, provide the username, and after that we will authenticate the user. Username password authentication token, name this authentication. This equals new instance of username authentication token. Here provide the user details, then credential is null, and the authorities, user details dot get authorities. After authenticating, we also need to set the authentication details, authentication dot set details. Here inside this method, provide new instance of web authentication details source, then build details and pass the request. We need to set the authentication in the security context. Security context holder dot get context dot set authentication and provide the authentication. And if there is any exception, then we log dot error with the exception message. And finally, we'll pass the request, then pass the request to the next filter of this filter chain using filter chain dot do filter method, pass request and response. Now navigate to security config. Here at the top, we need to inject this JWT authentication filter, private final JWT authentication filter, and in this security filter chain, here we do not need this HTTP basic anymore because from now on we'll do JWT based authentication. Here we'll instruct Spring Security to use stateless session management. Session management, here provide the lambda expression, session, provide the session creation policy dot session creation policy. This is session creation policy dot stateless. And finally, add filter before. We'll add JWT authentication filter before username password authentication filter. Username password authentication filter dot class. Let's check if we need anything else. Let's remove this unused import. Everything seems fine. Let's start the project and test everything. Here it failed to start. Let's check the reason. Application failed to start. Here this auth service required bin of type authentication manager, and this could not be found. Okay, let's define this bean. Here in this security config class, add a bean authentication manager. It accepts authentication configuration, auth config, and throws exception. Return auth config dot get authentication manager. Now start the project. This time project started successfully. Here you can see the Tomcat started on port 8080. Let's test this in the postman. This was our register method. Here we already have registered the user, and if we try to access that endpoint with this basic auth, let's send the request. Sure enough, we'll get this 403 forbidden response. As we have registered this user previously, let's truncate this database. Back to the ID, open the database tool. We need to close this console, refresh this. Inside this public schema, we have this table app underscore user. Let's check the data. This was our registered user. Delete this one and commit this. Our user is deleted. Now back to the postman. Navigate to this registration tab. Now we register this user again. Send this registration request. The registration was successful, and this returns this response with access token, refresh token, and the authority of the user. Now let's copy this access token. Navigate to the next step for sending REST request. Here we need to change this authorization from basic auth to BRR token. Paste the access token here and send the request. Now we can get this response from our controller. Let's check stored data in the Redis. In my IntelliJ idea, from this database tool, we can use this as GUI tool for our Redis. Open the database tool. This was our PostgreSQL database. Now click this plus icon, data source, search for Redis. We have not changed anything for our Redis server. I'm going with these default settings. Let's check the test connection if we can connect with Redis. So it is succeeded. Just click OK. This is our Redis database. Here is the stored data in the Redis. For now, let's remove all this data. Select all of this data. Right click, drop, and click OK. So our Redis database is cleared. Now back to the postman. This time I will test login functionality. Open a new tab. This is post request. The URL is localhost 8080 API auth login. Navigate to body tab. We will pass raw JSON data. Here provide a username. Username, this is my name, Iftekhar, and the password. Send a request. It's showing this 403 forbidden. I actually make this typing mistake in this password. Update this password. Now send a request. User is logged in successfully, and here in the response you can see we have this access token, refresh token, and authorities is provided. Let's check what is in the Redis database. Open the database tool, refresh. Here expand this. Here we have these two datas here. One is access token and another is for refresh token. Let's check this access token data. Here you can see we have this token value saved in this Redis. Similarly, for the refresh token, we have this refresh token values saved in this Redis. Now let's try to access the REST endpoint with this new access token. Copy this access token, navigate to the other tab. Let's move this tab to the right. This is our REST endpoint, and in the authorization, paste this access token and send request. Now you can see we have this message from the controller. And if you refresh, you have this data in this Redis. Now let's try to log out. Open a new tab. For logout, this is post request. The URL is localhost 8080. Then API /auth /logout. Navigate to authorization tab. Change the auth type to BRR token. And here paste the access token and send request. Here you can see the message, you have been signed out. Now let's try to access the REST endpoint. Navigate to other tab, and send a request. And here you can see we have this 403 forbidden. If you check the Redis data, now here you can see we have this blacklisted token saved in the Redis. In the Postman, navigate to this login tab and let's try to log in again. Our new access token is generated. Let's copy this access token. Navigate to the next step, that is for sending REST request, and update this token and send a request. Here now we are getting this response from the controller. If we check this Redis data, here you can see along with this blocklisted token we have other 2 token is available in this Redis. Now let's test refresh token. Open a new tab. For refresh token, it will be post request for the URL. Let's copy the URL from the other tab and paste it here and update the URL to refresh. Navigate to body tab, select raw data, type JSON. Here provide the JSON data. For refresh token, the data is refresh token. Here we need to provide the refresh token. Navigate to this login tab. From this tab, copy this refresh token, and in this refresh token request tab, paste this token and send a request. Here we have this newly generated access token. Let's try to access this REST endpoint with the previous access token. Navigate to this login tab, copy this access token, and now the REST request tab, replace this token and send request. See, now we cannot access this endpoint with the old access token. If we try to access this with the new access token, from this refresh token request, copy this access token and in the API request tab, replace this old token with the new one and send the request. Now we can access the endpoint. If you refresh the Redis, here you can see we have this access token and other token is available. Here maybe I made some mistake while defining this refresh token key. Let's open token repository. Here where was our refresh token key? Yeah, this one. Here this was user : refresh. Here we need to provide a colon. Okay, so that's all.
So that's how you can manage and revoke JWT tokens using Redis in a Spring Boot app. It's a simple trick that adds a powerful layer of control over authentication. If you are diving deeper into Spring security or want to build most robust Java backend system, I have got plenty of other practical videos on the channel. Go check them out, especially if you are looking to level up your hands-on skills with Spring Boot and real-world backend patterns. For the time being, bye-bye.